Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 54 of IGEL Weekly. I'm your host, Andy Whiteside. Chris and Feeney and I spent some time in the car last week and got caught up. Chris, how's it going?
Good, man. It was planes, trains, and all, not necessarily trains, but certainly planes and automobiles and rush hour traffic going into DC last week. So, good times, sort of.
So we were at the IGEL Disrupt in Washington, DC. So you didn't manage to get a train in there at all?
When I was at the airport trying to get home, it was delay city, man. It was crazy. And the thought crossed my mind about renting a car and just driving, or Amtrak was sort of in the back burner.
Yeah.
But we were able to finally get off the ground and, get home.
On the same day or a different day?
No, we left that day, but it was delayed a few hours. So
yeah, I've got to go to New York later this week, and my wife's already planning on me not making it home before the weekend.
Yeah, just it was partial weather, even though around the airport it wasn't really raining or lightning or nothing. But then, of course, you had all that stacks up, and then you have delay or just issues with staffing. No pilots, that type of thing. But
yeah, well, look, we can tie that into the topic here in a second, because what seems like it's easy to common people is not necessarily always easy. For example, making sure you have enough pilots in the hopper to fly during the summer travel season plus work season. That's got to be thought about years in advance in order for it to work out properly. And I think we're getting caught up in pandemic ebb and flow and people taking early retirement. And I was with a guy this weekend whose best friend is a pilot who's retiring yesterday. And I was like, man, that's horrible. Good timing for him. Horrible timing for the airline to lose yet another, senior resource. Patrick Toner is the XenTegra Solutions Architect that is our subject matter expert in IGEL. Patrick with us. Patrick, I'm going to ask the question: where are you sitting today?
So, speaking of planes, trains, and automobiles, mostly automobiles for me. I am sitting in Jacksonville, Florida. So I finally have arrived partially to my destination. We're still waiting to make settlement on our house. We've about 10 days in an Airbnb. But yeah, I spent the weekend. When you're traveling via car with 4 young children, 2 senior citizens, my in-laws are traveling with us. There's a lot of bathroom breaks. So we, not to mention all the coffee that we were drinking. So it took us a good 2-3 days to really, get through it. For some reason, Virginia, I can never figure it out, takes the longest to get through. Like, you feel like once you get past Virginia, the rest of that drive is easy.
Yeah, that's because it was the first state.
That's it. It definitely has the first state type traffic, especially Northern Virginia. It's it is just congested. I'm here. So we made it. We made it down, and I'm enjoying the nice humidity down here. We came right into a heat wave, as I think you predicted, Andy. So it's good.
You'll be appreciating that come October, November for sure.
Oh yeah.
Hey, my challenge to you is not this week, since it's your first week, but next week, get involved in the Citrix user group, the VMware user group, get the IGEL user group and the Nutanix user groups going down there, and just help build the community down there. It's that area is a huge and growing business community, and has a lot going on for it.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. Looking forward to meeting a lot of new people and, getting involved in those groups.
Yeah. So guys, we chose a topic for today. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here. That is about end user experience, specifically unified communications. And this is really a really technical article, but we're going to use it for a couple of things. One, we're going to, just like with the airline experience, it's more than you think. Like, so I'll pick on my wife specifically here. We go to fly, flights get canceled, and she doesn't understand why you can't just fix it, right? Well, first of all, I've got 6 people that we have to rebook. That's not easy. And second of all, you've got to have a crew of X. You got a ground crew, you got mechanical, you got weather situation. There's a lot that goes into things that most people don't think about. And in this case, we're talking about unified communications in the end user experience in a virtual desktop, virtual app world, specifically around Zoom. So let's quickly talk about how IGEL and Zoom work together to enable to enable that user experience, because I don't think Zoom has gotten fully done with Citrix and Microsoft and VMware and others. Them and Microsoft would be very interesting to fully have that offload experience within the system itself. And IGEL has to step up and make it happen for some of them, not Teams, but others. So Chris, can you explain just in general where if it's not native using like WebRTC and it has to be assisted by the endpoint's smartness, technology management, what does IGEL do to enable those offloading scenarios when it's not native to the protocol?
So great question. So what's actually interesting is we've done really well with Zoom for quite a bit now, certainly the last 2 years.
But Chris, am I right to say that the Zoom offloading within Citrix, VMware, Microsoft isn't native? It has to be helped, right?
Well, perhaps we should define a little bit what it is. The way I understand it is there's a plugin on the IGEL side. We actually have several versions to choose from to make it match up with the backend. And that, similar to how a virtual channel works with the endpoint, right? That has to communicate with the Zoom VDI install in the virtual session. And
so let me pause you there, right? So this way I understand it, and you and Patrick straighten me out. If I've got Teams, for example, in my Microsoft virtual desktop and Teams on the endpoint, by default, more or less, it's just going to find each other, going to offload it, and it's going to just do its thing. In the world of Zoom and others, we've got to be more prescriptive about making sure it does it. If not, then it won't offload. Patrick, is that true?
Yeah. Well, I think the main difference when we talk about being native is that the Teams agent is built into the Citrix Workspace app for Linux now, right? And it's pretty automatic. There are some versionings that you have to account for, but with Zoom, it's a little more specific. Zoom's offload agent is actually it's not built into the Citrix Workspace app or the VMware Horizon application. It's actually a separate application that resides. You can manually install it if you want to, but in IGEL, it sits in the IGEL operating system. Yeah. It has to be flipped on, and versioning is very particular. You have to make sure you're in the right versions. There's a little bit of wiggle room there, but yeah, it's definitely a little more planning goes into when you're working with Zoom and Teams.
Yeah, so sorry to interrupt you, Chris. You're on the right path. I just wanted to point out, to my best of my knowledge, it's all a matter of the Workspace app leveraging WebRTC to tie the two together, and it just natively works. Whereas in your world, you guys have done amazing things with Zoom to make that work as an offload technology, and it's not native. You have to, control it. Go ahead, Chris. I'm sorry.
Yeah, so let's make sure we're being very clear on this. So on the IGEL device, we have the Zoom VDI plugin, and it works across all the three protocols, Citrix, Horizon, AVD. So that means that when you're running Zoom inside your virtual session, you are offloading the video audio down to the endpoint. The Zoom thing is still running in the virtual session, but you're pushing all the processing power down to the endpoint, so you don't have to run it on the back end. And we've had that in place for a while. Now, in the version matching, what I've learned is that to the point where we've added, and this is basically true across all the different technologies, but generally speaking, we've got 3 versions of the Zoom VDI plugin. This is the part that is on the endpoint. So if your backend, let's say your backend is Zoom 5.5.
Hey, Chris, I'm sorry. I think what you said was slightly off. Let me say it back to you the way I think it is, and then we'll go from there. The plugin actually goes in the virtual desktop. The agent goes on the IGEL endpoint. Isn't that the correct way to say it?
No, I disagree with that. I think it's you got the Zoom VDI plugin, which is on the endpoint. That connects to the Zoom VDI installation inside the virtual session. Okay. Essentially an agent of sorts, but they both talk to each other. And if you have the right horsepower on the endpoint to handle whatever you're trying to do there, then you'll be able to offload.
Well, let me say it like this. Okay, so in the virtual desktop, you have to install a specific version of Zoom, right? It's not a plugin; it's a specific version, or is it actually a plugin? Which one, or is it?
In the virtual desktop, there is an actual install called Zoom VDI or something like that. We can look it up, but it's a specific install that's in the virtual desktop.
Okay. And then I'm trying to use the word plugin intentionally here, because I can tell you for me, it got confusing when different people both called the thing a plugin. One was talking about the virtual desktop side and one was talking about the endpoint side, and they both used the word plugin, and I crossed them up when I went to install it the first time.
Right. So to help with some of the confusion here, the article, actually the author here actually wrote a guide that's out there. He's posted it in the community. It's called the UCC guide, IGEL UCC guide. Look it up. You can just Google that and find it. And he kind of helps maybe eliminate some of that confusion. But for definitions, for the purposes of our listeners, the plugins are going to be on the endpoint. Somebody may call it the client or something like that, but we're really talking about a plugin that is going to connect back into and talk to the actual instance of Zoom or Teams, for example, inside the virtual session. When those two marry together, so let's see here's an example. So you have the VDI release, right? This is what's installed inside the virtual desktop. And then so the plugin has to match, right? So let's say the back end is 5.10. The plugin has to be 5.10 or lower. It can't be higher. And their versioning numbers jumped from 3 to 5. So it's interesting, right? I think they're matching the version stuff now, so it's a little bit easier.
Yeah. Because I think the main confusion for me is in this case, Zoom is the one defining what we're calling what. So if it's VDI software in the virtual desktop, and then it's the plugin on the Windows endpoint, and in your case, that plugin, aka agent, is built in the IGEL operating system, right?
Yeah, we actually have 3 versions, so you can pick and choose. Similar to how we have 3 versions of the Workspace app, 3 versions of the plugin to make sure that you can match up the right one. And those get updated as they come out and get released by Zoom, and make their way into our firmware. Yeah. But this is a good article here. This is a source of truth essentially. So you'll see here they have different things for different types. VMware, Citrix, AVD, for example, Cloud PC. So. Got
it. Okay. Patrick, any additional context to help clarify this part of the conversation so far you'd like to add? Because I know we've kind of, probably my fault, been all over the place.
Yeah, I think it's just, we've seen it over COVID, right? The whole pandemic. I was working with customers during that time where this was just we went from nobody using it to the entire world using it, right? And Zoom was having to churn out all different, versions because of security and this and that. So it historically was a little confusing for a lot of customers. I mean, we went through the fire with a lot of customers, and during that time, figuring this out. But IGEL's made it nice, like to Chris's point, with those 3 versions. And customers can now pretty easily standardize on one version. One thing I do like to Google, because when I just need a level set on this, is if you Google Zoom VDI backwards compatibility, they have a little guide that comes up, Zoom does, and it'll match like, hey, which version of the Zoom VDI agent do I need a VDI? What it correlates to what version of the plugin. So they do have a nice kind of web page that matches all those versions together, just for anyone listening, if you do get lost there, because it can get a little confusing.
Yeah. Now I have a quick question for you guys, and we'll jump back into this. But if I am using Zoom and it is offloading properly, do I just look for the telltale signs of dragging windows around and it chasing it, or is there a way to tell that it's being offloaded within my virtual desktop?
Yeah, there's actually, in the Zoom VDI client, you can go into the settings. I believe it's called, I don't have it in front of me, but you can go into the settings, and I think it's under statistics. You go to the statistics tab, and there's actually a little Zoom VDI tab there. You can click, it'll tell you which version of the agent you're running, which version of the plugin, and it'll tell you if they're actually connecting. So if you see it say not connected there, you know for sure it's not working.
Now, okay, so just for our admins out there, right? You can drag it around. You can see the window chasing it. You can go to the local IGEL client and look at the task related. What's the task manager called in IGEL? I've forgotten.
You're talking about TOP?
Yeah, your performance stuff to see if you're getting a lot of CPU local usage. And then Patrick, when you say you can look at the agent and figure it out, is that inside the virtual desktop or
It
local?
is.
Okay.
Yep, that's inside the virtual desktop. You launch the Zoom VDI, application, and then you go into the Zoom settings, and they have a tab in there called Statistics, and
Okay,
that's where you'll see Zoom VDI.
So I guess philosophically, you're in the virtual desktop, but because it's really offloading it, you're looking at it when you don't know it.
Right.
It's crazy, but awesome. So again, kudos to IGEL for knowing this is an issue, working with Zoom. Kudos to Zoom for knowing it's an issue, and then IGEL for supporting it. And then I'll ask you guys like a philosophical business and a business question all at the same time. Do you ever see a day where Microsoft enables all these other unified communications players to play along natively, or do you think it's always going to be an out-of-band experience that you guys have to help make work?
I guess, Andy, I'm not tracking with you on the native piece. So maybe can you elaborate on what you mean by that? Because I think I'm getting lost in how you're translating that.
So Teams is part of the Microsoft stack, which is part of the company that has the most widely used Microsoft application in the world, which is Windows. So they make this all kind of native and working together, and they want to make it so where it just kind of happens through the connection, unbeknownst to you. If things line up properly, it happens. If not, then it's not offloaded, and then hopefully you got enough processing power on the back end and connectivity to make it less impactful. But it's really kind of native, whereas Zoom is creating their own VDI plugin and their own agent plugin to make it work. Do you ever see a day where it just is part of the operating system, where it can be as native as possible? Or is it always going to be this workaround scenario that works, don't get me wrong, that's kind of a bolt-on versus just a slight tweak to make it work?
So a couple things. With regard to Teams, as they were adding in support for Teams optimization with AVD more specifically, and I guess Cloud PC for that matter. So I kind of do one and the same. They had to make some updates to Teams, first of all, to be able to, process that and handle it. And then on the IGEL side, we've built our own AVD client, essentially, that can get you into that resource. There were some updates that we did in concert with them. Yeah. So the way these things, the nice thing about the way it works on the Teams side and is that once you've got, you have to install Teams a certain way. There's instructions from Microsoft on how to install Teams so that it'll be an optimized state. And then on the IGEL side, it's just a matter of checkbox, and you connect in with the right firmware version that can do that. Then you open up Teams and you can go into like the about and see if it says AVD media optimized.
Yeah, but you didn't have to set up any profile or anything on your side. It just saw each other and happened, right? If you did it right.
Basically you just set up a standard AVD session connection, and we've kind of got it built in. And it just sort of works. Now, obviously third-party non-Microsoft apps like Zoom and WebEx, they sit on top of those things, and they have those clients and stuff like that are required in order to get their technology to work the same way effectively.
And I think I know the answer to my question. I'm just trying to vet out the conversation of, you go 2 years ago, you wouldn't have caught me using Skype or even Microsoft Teams. Now it's just part of my world. And I literally had a phone call a while ago, and I said, oh, I need to share screen, hang up. And I ended up doing a team session with this person in a matter of 5 seconds. It just became native experience. I didn't have to say, okay, am I on IGEL? Am I not on IGEL? Has the profile been enabled? Has it not been enabled? I just did it and it just worked.
Yeah. Yeah. Sorry, go ahead, Patrick.
No, I was going to say, it's really has become just mission critical for every organization. And I think back to the original question, you were asking there, Andy. I think it's the Zoom Teams thing is interesting to me because Teams obviously is Microsoft's baby, right? But the one thing that it just struck me is Zoom, I think, had offloading at least from IGEL non-Windows devices working in AVD before Teams, right? So I think Zoom has been they've really been pushing the boundaries as far as being the more innovative technology. But Microsoft, they own the stack. So I can't, I mean, you look at Citrix, like how they've integrated into their workspace app. They haven't done that with Zoom. But it seems to me, Teams is caught up. They're both pretty they're both pretty good at. But Zoom is, in my opinion, a little bit further along as far as like how the technical features and just how it performs. But obviously, it's an extra cost to a customer. So for Teams is fully integrated, right? I have my whatever package. I have access to Teams. I just have to have it configured correctly now. You could. It's probably going to get a little tougher and tougher on Teams, or I'm sorry, on Zoom to be competitive, unless they're just continually innovating and leading, right? Which they've managed to do so far.
Yeah, or you go back to old days where customers had a reason to do everything they could to want to fight the Microsoft world. Now, because of the O365, M365, a kinder, nicer, gentler, at least proceed to play with everybody world at Microsoft, there's less of this, I hate Microsoft, I'm getting out any way I can stuff that used to go on. Kudos to Microsoft for figuring out that's the future, embrace everybody, don't try to kill them. So yeah, we'll see what happens to a great technology like Zoom. Could be better, but if it's not integrated and native and part of the licensing that you already own, lots of things have died. Go talk to Novell.
Yeah. And a lot of customers I've talked to, and Chris, I don't know, Chris and Andy, both you guys, if you've seen the same. I mean, Zoom was their strategy, 2020 into 2021, but almost everybody was saying, oh yeah, we're moving to Teams. That's our plan. That's kind of been the conversation I've been having for the last 2 years with people.
Yeah, well, I mean, you have a new product, AVD now, Windows and Cloud PC now, launched without a full feature set, but adding more functionality over the course of time, functionality and features that current vendors that have been in this space for a long time have had and have figured out how to make it all work. Zoom being one of those. At some point, Teams are probably going to have just as good or just as the same or whatever. Microsoft is who they are, and they'll have that feature parity. And one of the, to get back to our purpose of today's conversation, one of those is virtual backgrounds.
Yeah.
I'm using one right now as we're talking. Patrick, you're not. Andy, you're not. But it's that is it could be a branded thing or whatever it could be, whatever. But that actually feature was more recently added in Teams, more specifically with AVD, whereas Zoom's had it for a while. But
well, let's use that to talk through like this whole conversation of just because you thought it was easy, it's not easy. And I'll go back to, picking on my wife in the airline conversation. You get on a plane and it doesn't have that smart screen in front of you on the plane from point A to point B, but the one to get to point A, did have it. Like, why can't they all just have it? I'm like, do you realize what it would take to make sure they all had it? And is that the future when everybody has a handheld device? And it's a much bigger conversation than just, snap, make it happen. And here's the great example here, the backgrounds, right? You're using Zoom on your Windows machine, your home computer, whatever it is. And you got backgrounds, and all of a sudden you get in your virtual desktop and you don't, and you're like, well, I don't understand why that can't just happen. And here's, example of why you need to know more.
Yeah. And that's why we have partners like yourselves who, our job is to educate you and help you understand how, is it a feature that's not yet available, or is it a workaround for the moment, and then eventually it's just part of it.
Yeah.
But it's one of these little things that it's kind of cool. You can do all these things, but when you don't have it because it's not supported or whatever, it makes a difference. And in this work from home, I'm like, right now you can't see what's behind me. It looks like it's my office. I've had a lot of comments about this particular background. But my, behind the scenes, what you don't see behind the curtain is my son walking by, going to getting ready for his day. So,
well, I mean, think about it. There was a point in time when you had an automobile that did not have a radio in it. That was an upgrade. Now, if your car doesn't have Apple CarPlay or some type of CarPlay, you think there's an issue, right? You have to have that. We'll get to a point in the next little bit where Apple CarPlay, Android Play, or whatever, or both will be in every car. You may not even have a radio anymore. It'll just be all part of your smart device, and that will be the standard.
Yeah. Well, I remember years ago, before I got into the vendor space, one of my big projects was setting up hotel internet, high-speed internet access. And it got to a point where, we were using Cisco devices to kind of help with the management of that, getting online, that type of thing. But it was a product Cisco bought, slapped their logo on it, and the training for it wasn't that great. And I would set it up, and I thought I had things right, but when it didn't work, the hotel manager was calling, looking for help because he had people checking out, going to some other hotel because they needed it. It became a thing. Almost overnight, I want to say just all of a sudden, that was the thing, right? They don't use the phone anymore. They don't use dial-up. They needed that internet access, wireless or wired or whatever. And if it doesn't work, I'm going to go find somewhere where it does. And I totally agree. I mean, it's a must-have, right? Just like on that airplane, right? I mean, look at the strategy we talked about. Some put the screen, and by doing so, they're putting extra weight in the airplane. And they might retrofit it later where they just give you better Wi-Fi and use your own personal device. I know Southwest takes that approach, for example. But anyways,
our listeners may not get this, and you guys have been around this long enough. I am literally doing the Zoom on this screen, and I've got my VDI desktop on the other screen. And I haven't had this happen in forever, but something about recording the Zoom is causing my mouse not to work properly in the VDI desktop, which used to not be all that uncommon. And you'd have to reconnect or relog in or whatever. I mean, simple things that the average person, including probably all of us, thinks should just work. There's millions of lines of code potentially to make that work. And we just take it for granted, just like the idea that I should have my custom background or virtual background in my VDI Zoom session the same way I do local. And, it's not that easy. It's doable and easier these days, but it's not just turned on by default. And if you don't have that, all of a sudden you're getting help desk tickets and you've lost credibility with your end user in your VDI world. But they just took for granted that everything just happens exactly the same way. And because we're offloading in this case of the IGEL, it is a massive difference, but still the end user has to have the same experience. Let me say this real quick. I should have said this. The article, if anybody wants to look it up, is February 2nd from Lars. What's Lars's last name, guys? Oh, Glöckner. Yep. And the name of it is How to Configure Zoom Virtual Backgrounds on IGEL OS. I think we might have skipped that part earlier, but guys, I don't know if we have to go into detail on so Chris, well, let me say this, the Zoom custom partitions that he's got going on here. So this is actually a little bit of a step ahead. This is creating custom partitions, not just using the native Zoom agent that's built into IGEL. Am I saying that right?
No. So what you've got here at the bottom of this article, he covers all the bases. So you can install Zoom, the actual Zoom client on IGEL as a custom partition. And so he's saying that if you use that option, here's how you can, get a virtual background to work.
You have to do a custom partition to get a virtual background. You can't just use
No. So then the other three, Zoom on Citrix, Horizon, or AVD, that's where Zoom is running from within that session. But the offloading is occurring down to the IGEL device, and you want a virtual background. Yes. So he covers all four options essentially.
So Chris, if I wanted to use Zoom natively on IGEL without a virtualization platform in the middle, I can do that?
That would be through the Zoom Linux app, which can only be installed as a custom partition on IGEL.
Yeah, I'm going to have to get that done by my help desk team because I need that because I won't always be in a virtual desktop when I'm trying to do Zoom.
Yeah, and I would recommend certainly going back and forth. I have Zoom locally installed. You could do Teams locally installed or just Edge as a browser. You can run Edge and Teams from Edge very well on IGEL OS. So, but to this article, to your point, you can run Zoom locally. It has to be installed as a custom partition. We have a whole IGEL community site on how to make that work. And then if you're running Zoom on these three other options, Citrix, Horizon, AVD, he gives instructions on what to do. You're basically modifying a file. And for the Linux geeks out there, there's a command called sed, which basically you're replacing text. And he shows you how to do that in this article. Patrick, I'm sure you've dealt with the sed command in your time here at IGEL before and maybe since.
Once or twice. Yeah, I've had to deal with that. Yeah. So, yeah, and it's great. It's great that, if you look at this, he's obviously editing the INI file to add replace some text in there to make this happen. So it's a great little command.
Hey, here's a question for you guys. Does IGEL care to add Zoom and Teams and WebEx into the operating system as a natively usable thing, or is it a conflict for them to put it in? Like, obviously, you guys have it in there to be used inside of a virtual session, but you haven't really seemed to put things in for native usage. Why is that? I know you guys have a Chromium browser now. So you can use local, browser, but you don't really have native applications turned on, user facing. You do for some things, but not these specific things. Is there, what do you think is going on there? Why?
Short answer is licensing.
Got it.
The ability to, that's really the issue.
Got it.
Now, what's different about a custom partition is it's not natively baked in. When you're doing that, we have obviously the Citrix Workspace app for Linux and VMware. We've already got agreements with those to be able to deploy it and install it. Now, some of this is going to change with OS 12. The app itself would be on our app store, or dang it, I keep saying that. Sorry, Apple. App portal.
Apple's listening right now. You're in trouble.
That's right, they are. We're going to get thrown off the air. This thing's definitely not good. This podcast is definitely going to get thrown off of the Apple environment. Anyway, but there'll be and so you'll have like the native Zoom client if you want to install that as a local app, for example, or the browser. Those will be available. Now you can still, the plugins will also be available. I'm pretty sure. Question mark on that. I need to confirm that, but but that's where we're going to, is base operating system, and then whatever apps you want will come down from this portal concept.
Well, I bring this up for two reasons. One, because I'm curious from an industry perspective, and two, I've got a big 34-inch all-in-one that will be running IGEL that the LG guys gave me last week, and I'm going to move to that as my primary work computer, and I want to be able to use it with or without my virtual desktop in between.
First of all, I'm really jealous. I need to have a conversation with Naveed. No, that's awesome. Yeah, there it is. Is it a curved one? Did they get you?
It's flat. It's the one they had at the conference last week. If I could take it home.
Still, that's a lot of real estate. It's awesome. I've got a 32-inch, basically a TV that I could use as a monitor next to me here.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's nice.
Well, guys, I think we've covered it, right? I think we've covered the fact that there's a way to turn on virtual background from Lars's article here, and I think we've had a great conversation around what this space looks like at the moment. Hopefully, we haven't confused people. Happy to have a conversation with anybody who wants to talk about it further. Just maybe hit me up on LinkedIn. Sure, Chris and Patrick would do the same. And look, it's not easy, but it's so much more doable today than before. The idea that Patrick can go up and down the East Coast trying to find a house and work, and then Chris and I can work from conferences, and we find multiple ways to get home.
Traffic.
Yeah, cars, traffic. It's just it's an awesome time. My family would be quick to tell you that just means Dad can work more, and that's the other balance. I think we had Father's Day, and the good news is I got to spend it with my family. The bad news is I did a couple of little work things in between, and that balance of this hybrid work world. But technologies like IGEL making it doable, and end users should not even have to know that you guys on the back end, our sysadmins, did magical things to make it happen.
Yeah, the other thing too is I'll just say this stuff is changing rapidly. I mean, there have been in the last 2 years, this area, this unified comms, that's where we've seen, I would say, the majority of the updates from all the vendors, the apps and stuff like that, as they add or fix things, new features. It's just become so rapid. So if something isn't working now and you're not quite sure, it's probably because it's already been solved and it's an upgrade thing, or it's on a list of things to come. All that being said, to help kind of talk through this and get really our hands deep into it, Patrick and I have teed up the author of this article, Lars Glöckner. He's a fantastic architect on our side, and he has graciously offered his time for a workshop we've got coming up here in August. So definitely hope to see you all there. We're going to dig deeply into the whole unified comms space, and more specifically with IGEL, and Lars will get there to kind of show us. He's got an amazing lab where he can test all this stuff out, and then he puts this stuff out there in a guide to help the community get this right. And certainly, if you want to learn more about it, come. Now we'll have that information out here soon. I suspect, Patrick, right?
Yeah, so it's actually live now. So if you go to XenTegra.com/events, you see all of our events coming up. We do workshops, webinars, and this one will specifically be a workshop on August 18th. So anyone listening, you can go there now. You can sign up. This will be one. I mean, I think pretty much every customer that we talk to is, they need a strategy for this. So this is a great way to see how to configure each one of these, whether it be Zoom, Teams, WebEx. We'll get into the weeds and kind of walk through all the different configurations on August 18th. So it's XenTegra.com/events. That's where you can find that and more. But definitely sign up for this one if you want to learn more about this.
Yeah. One last thing before we wrap up, I'll just say a lot of these features and stuff like that, the endpoint is going to matter. If you're going to offload audio and video down to that device, you're going to want to make sure you understand what horsepower you have and what's capable. Those are some things I've learned working on all this stuff. So we have a great tool that XenTegra certainly has access to and can kind of help figure out if your existing device could be repurposed and meet this need. For example, being able to support something like this background option, or are you only just going to get a limited subset, or is it going to be all of the above? So if you're not quite sure, well, we have the information to help figure those answers out. And if it looks like you might need a better endpoint, we've got great partnerships with the likes of LG and Lenovo and others, and XenTegra certainly is engaged with those as well. So let's have that conversation.
And Chris, what you're really highlighting there is you have access to all this power and capabilities, and there's a business justification for reusing devices, which is good for the environment, good for your bottom line. There's huge initiatives by companies to find ways to throw less stuff away. And this is just one way we can do it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thanks for the time again, gentlemen. Always a pleasure.
Absolutely. Thank you, guys.
All right. Take care.